Obsessed. Check out this review on mood, memory, and brain from Heart and Soil. I've tried a number of brain supporting supplements, coffee, fruit, etc. Didn't notice any difference. However, 2 to 3 months into taking beef brain from Heart and Soil supplements, my memory became unstoppable. I am terrible with names, or at least I used to be. Now I remember names of people so well that others comment on what a good memory I have. I'm also an actor as a hobby, and this has made memorizing my lines so much easier. Indispensable. I am obsessed. That is from Mariel S. And there's another amazing review for the same supplement for the mood, memory, and brain from Heart and Soil that I think is worth sharing as well. And it is titled Life Changing. Through adopting an animal-based carnivore diet and eating whole organs and desiccated supplements, I've had near complete resolution of lifelong anxiety. I'm more calm and stable and emotionally resilient. Mood, memory, and brain is something I can tell if I've taken or not. It's a major needle mover. Pairing this with Firestarter and Whole Package is my current go-to stack. That is from Maxwell G. I know that is so freaking cool. And a lot of questions I get on anxiety. People say, what about this or that for anxiety? And I always think, correct the root cause of your anxiety. But how cool is it that changing your diet to an animal-based diet with meat and organs and pairing that with an evolutionarily consistent food like brain and liver and bone marrow, in the case of mood, memory, and brain, is helping people improve their anxiety, something that most doctors would say has no treatment, that diet won't affect at all. And I love bucking that paradigm. So you can check us out at heartandsoil.co, that is .co. And this is the company that I started. It is based in Austin, Texas. We source only grass-fed, grass-finished, regeneratively raised organs. I should mention there has never been a case of bovine spongiform encephalopathy in New Zealand. Those brains are pristine. And believe me, New Zealand is very secure with what they let in the country. So that is very, very safe source for brain and other desiccated organs. Our mission is to help you reclaim your birthright to radical health. My guest on this week's podcast is Heidi Montag, who is a new friend of mine. And she actually reached out to me. She's previously from the Hills. She's married to Spencer Pratt, who was on the Hills. I admit that I didn't know much of this. I didn't really know the Hills, but it's awesome that someone from Hollywood has gotten interested in animal-based diets, and she's found many benefits. Both Spencer and Heidi are doing the Animal-Based 30 this month with us. You can sign up for this at animalbased30.com. And we would love to have you join us for the challenge this month. But Heidi reached out to me and she said, hey, what if I interview you as a lay woman, a lay person asking questions about animal-based diets? I'm a house, mom. I think she used the term housewife. I don't mean that to be pejorative in any way. She's clearly, interested in her health. And so she has a 4-year-old child. She's had some issues with fertility. We troubleshoot that. We troubleshoot many common questions that people have about animal-based diets. We troubleshoot her husband's, Spencer Pratt's, issues with weight loss and come up with some interesting ideas. And so I think a lot of gems came out of this podcast. It's mostly her interviewing me, but I think it will be very beneficial for people who are looking for pretty high-level basic explanations of these things. And that's what I hope it will be. So enjoy this podcast with Heidi Montag from the Hills. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave me a review at Apple Podcasts. That's a big needle mover for me. It's how we spread the message. The number of reviews there really affects how many people will find this podcast, and hopefully how many people will then find massive benefit in the information that I try really hard to share for free on this podcast. So like I mentioned earlier, join us for Animal-Based 30. There's also a gathering happening in Santa Teresa that I want to tell you guys about. It is March 11th to the 14th. All the proceeds benefit the Animal-Based Nutrition Research Foundation, which is a foundation that I started to actually fund some legitimate animal-based research, which is hopefully happening in the near future. So join us in Santa Teresa. The website for that one is animalbasedgathering.com. We'd love to have you here for surfing and playing in water and jumping off waterfalls and all that good stuff. Okay, guys, on to the podcast with Heidi. Enjoy this one. Stay radical. All right, we'll press record. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So how is your month going?
Me on. It's good. I have 1,000,001 questions for you. I've been listening to you, and Spencer got me on you, and I've been dealing with a lot of different things and issues and we have our son, and we're always just striving for the best health and lifestyle. And when I started listening to you, I just didn't believe it. And I was like, I can't do this. I'm going to miss out on like, these nutrients. And I'm really nervous about this. And, my mom is a nutritionist and she's very big into salads and vegetables and everything like that. So I just was a little bit concerned, but it like makes sense and it feels good. And I've always make sure to have meat with every meal I have. Because I'm a big carnivore myself. I always say that people are like, I'm a vegan. I'm like, I'm a carnivore. And it's so funny. That's what you say. Cause I love meat. I just always have. So I just have a bunch of questions for you. And I was hoping that we could kind of clear some things up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hit me. You can go ahead, shoot.
All right. But funny enough, I'll tell you a quick story first. We took a one-way jet to Costa Rica, like 13 years ago. And we're like, we're moving to Costa Rica. We don't have any money. We'll put all of our money into a one-way jet and we're going to stay here. And then we ran out of money at the Four Seasons Papagayo. And we're like, all right, we're going to buy a little land. But then the squatters have like rights there. And we're like, well, what are we going to do? We don't have any like mercenaries here, anyone to help us get the land. And we were like so out of our element, but you are living in one of the best places ever.
Costa Rica is really special. It's an amazing place. I never thought that I would be an expat. I never thought that I would live in Central America. I took Spanish when I was in high school and then in college. And so it's come in handy and it's been rusty the whole time, but it's been good to refresh it and get back to it. But it's been a revelation, just friendly people. Nothing is easy here, but it's worth it. Like a lot of the roads are dirt. You can't get things on Amazon. If you want, like I wanted to get a weight set up for my house. I wanted to get a squat rack and a bar and some plates. And it's like a whole huge production. But the trade-off is that in front of my house, I have an amazing wave pool, which is working almost every single day. And there's sun. I have an amazing tanning bed outside, an amazing wave pool, and a great garden and monkeys and all sorts of pets. So it's good.
And you don't wear sunscreen, right?
I don't wear any sunscreen. When I first got here, because the latitude is at 9, so it's 9 north latitude. When I first got here, I wore a little bit of sunscreen on my face and I had to wear a shirt when I was surfing because it was February of 2021. And so I was pretty pale from Austin. And then I was in Africa a little bit before that with the Hadza. But then over time, like once I was here for a week or two, I didn't really have to wear sunscreen and never looked back. And now I can go out in the sun for hours in the middle of the day and I don't get burned. Sometimes my nose gets a little burned, but nothing major. So you adapt to it.
Okay. And so on that note, that is one of the questions I have for my son. So he hates sunscreen, right? Like hysterically cries every time I put on sunscreen. We have a company that we've developed too that actually Kat developed. And it's basically it's no chemicals, no preservatives, everything, but it's plant derived. And so that's made me a little bit nervous lately. And I'm like, well, I don't know what products I should actually be putting on my skin or my son's skin, because a lot of these really healthy, less chemical products are plant-based. And that made me a little bit concerned. And so I want to ask you what you would recommend, if he should have sunscreen, if he should be having certain soaps or lotions.
This is a fantastic question. So have you heard me talk about linoleic acid and linoleic acid in seed oils, this 18 carbon polyunsaturated fatty acid in seed oils? So what's interesting for me about this polyunsaturated fatty acid that occurs in oils from corn, canola, sunflower, safflower, et cetera, is that this oil, it seems to incorporate into our cell membranes. Humans have this unique physiology. We're monogastric animals. We have one stomach, along with chickens and pigs and many other animals. So in monogastric animals, we don't possess the biochemistry that allows us to convert these polyunsaturated fatty acids to saturated fatty acids. So all the polyunsaturated fatty acids we eat, they kind of accumulate in us. You know, like vitamin D and vitamin A and vitamin K are fat soluble vitamins. Well, polyunsaturated fatty acids they're fat. So they're fat soluble fatty acids. So they accumulate. So the more we eat, the more they accumulate in all of the membranes of our cells. So our cells have this lipid bilayer, and that lipid bilayer is composed of phospholipid heads and then these two tails, usually 2 or 3 tails that come off the phospholipids. And those tails can be either saturated, monounsaturated, or polyunsaturated fats. And so when we eat more polyunsaturated fat, we accumulate more polyunsaturated fats in those phospholipids in the membranes of our cells. So that, I think, is at the root of a lot of chronic illness, especially when the membranes of our mitochondria, which also have a cell membrane, mitochondria are like these primordial bacteria that got incorporated, hundreds of millions of years ago into the first eukaryotic cell, and they become this power plant in the cell. But the mitochondria have a membrane too, and that membrane can become enriched in linoleic acid, and the cardiolipin in the mitochondrial membrane can become enriched in linoleic acid, and then our actual cell membrane on the outside of our cells can become enriched in linoleic acid. And so when you eat linoleic acid, you can imagine that all of these cells in your face, all these cells in your skin, I don't know if you ever did the experiment in high school where you did the cheek swab, and you can see the cells from your cheeks, right? You can see the actual cells. Well, everything on your skin, whether it's your eye or your face or your nose or your lips or your epidermis of your arm, there's epidermal cells here that have cell membranes. And when we eat more linoleic acid, the concern is that the membranes of those cells get increasing amounts of linoleic acid. The problem then being that this linoleic acid is a polyunsaturated fatty acid. It has a lot of double bonds between the carbons. And then when the sun hits it, right, you get this ultraviolet radiation, which is good because it makes vitamin D and nitric oxide and endorphins in your skin. But that ultraviolet radiation can also oxidize or damage the cell membranes in your epidermis. So you can get problems in your fat cells, which is probably the root of chronic illness and diabetes and insulin resistance. But if you have fragile cell membranes on your skin, the hypothesis would be, is this the root of a lot of skin cancers for people? I don't think the sun is the ultimate proximate cause of skin cancer. I think it's the sun plus our bad diets, which are enriched in linoleic acid, which makes epidermal cells in our skin that are fragile and basically erode, corrode, oxidize, break when they're exposed to the radiation from the sun. You hear this all the time in circles. People will say, oh, when I stopped eating so many polyunsaturated fatty acids, I tan a lot more and I burn a lot less. So that's really interesting. There's just a lot of anecdotal evidence for that. If you ask on Twitter anywhere, people go crazy. They say, oh yeah, I burn so much less and I tan so much more easily. So this is a roundabout way of answering your question. So the linoleic acid you eat can accumulate in your membranes. But what we know is that when you put things on your skin, your body absorbs them. This is like the big organ, right? Whether it's your face, your chest, your back, your arms, our body takes things in. We don't see it as porous, but I mean, the sweat comes out of our skin. There's pores, right? There's like all these little holes in our skin. We're basically this field of skin with all these little holes in it. And so when you put something on like this field with holes, all of it seeps down into the dirt, which is the inside of our body. We know that when we use traditional sunscreens, they have compounds called oxybenzones and avobenzones. And there's a whole lawsuit going on right now with many manufacturers of mainstream sunscreens like Johnson & Johnson and others. And these compounds are excreted in the pee and the poop, and they're put on the skin so we can absorb things through the skin. So the concern that I have with plant-based cosmetics and plant-based sunscreens is that they are going to get absorbed, and that because they're lipids, they're going to become incorporated into the cell membranes of our face, our skin, and that they could be even worsening things. Now, a lot of those products have really bad additives like oxybenzones and avobenzones. But, I used to use a sunscreen. This is part of my learning over the last few years. And I won't name the brand, but it's a natural sunscreen, but it has the first ingredient or the second ingredient, I think, is either sunflower or safflower oil. So there's none of these oxybenzones or avobenzones. It has non-nano zinc, which is the thing you want to use on your sunscreen, like a zinc-based sunscreen. But when you put a sunflower oil or safflower oil in your skin, the concern is, does that enrich the cell membranes of your skin? Does it make your skin more susceptible to photoaging, wrinkles, cancers, etc.? So for your sun specifically, it sounds like the sunscreen you're using may not have the oxybenzone, the avobenzone, the bad chemicals that are linked to cancer. But if there's a lot of plant-based ingredients, you can read the label. If there's a lot of plant-based oils, then it could have more linoleic acid than I would want to see in that sunscreen. So your question was, should my son use sunscreen? It depends on the latitude he's at and the fairness of his skin. Right now, you're in Los Angeles, right? The Los Angeles, Southern California area. Yeah. And it's February. So I don't really think most people need sunscreen this time of year, even in Los Angeles. Here in Costa Rica, the 9th latitude, a lot of people will need sunscreen, but because we don't get a lot of seasonal variation in where the sun is in the sky. But, even in Los Angeles, you'll note the sun isn't that high in the sky right now. He's probably okay without sunscreen. Now, if you put him out in the sun and he gets burned, then he needs to cover up more and he's going to need something because we want him to be in the sun. But I bet, this is just my guess, he won't need anything right now in the sun. And this is presuming his diet is low linoleic acid, which we can talk about, and then also presuming that he's not putting things on his skin like moisturizers or other things that are high in seed oils. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So if you had a son or a kid in general, would you ever put sunscreen on them? Or in the summer, would you kind of just let it be? Or like, what would you do? That's what I'd love to know. Like, if for your kid in general, what would you do for diet? What would you do with sunscreen? What would you do with lotions? Like, I just really want the best for him at such a young age. He's 4. So I'm hoping he's, not damaged enough from one way or another. He really only eats meat anyways. Sometimes he eats a little bit more pizza, or, we try to always make it organic and things like that. But in general, he just eats meat for every meal, and naturally that's what he likes.
Yeah,
But in general, I just want to know, like, what would you do for sunscreen? What would you do for all that?
sure. Yeah. So I don't have kids right now. I have a sister who has a son and a daughter. My niece is 4 and my nephew is 2. And so what I've encouraged her to do, obviously it's her choice, but the way I've thought about her kids for food, I'll get to that in a moment, but I'll say for sunscreen first. So they live in Virginia, so I don't think they need sunscreen almost ever, as long as they're getting enough sun exposure gradually. But you want to, if you put them out in the sun and they're getting burned, then they need to adapt to it. But even at the 9th latitude here, I think kids could be fine if you just temper them and like gradually expose them to more and more sun. I really think for kids that they need a lot of sun exposure growing up and they don't get enough. I actually bought my sister for Christmas a sun lamp because I wanted them it's like a little mini tanning bed. It has bulbs that have a combination of UVA and UVB. And so I wanted the kids to get a little bit of sun, quote unquote, the best we could do in the Virginia winter, because they're not going to get any. But in Los Angeles and like Southern California, you're going to get a little more. So I think as long as he's outside and he's kind of getting some color on his skin, he should be fine. Unless he's like going from, say you took a vacation to Hawaii, then he's going to have this massive change, right? If you're staying at the same latitude and he's always getting some sun exposure, his body will gradually adapt and he shouldn't need a lot of sunscreen. And I don't think, so this is probably the statement that I should make for people. I definitely disagree with the mainstream notion that the sun is harmful or causes photoaging if we can eat and live well. There's this dermatology notion that like you should always wear sunscreen when you go outside. I think a lot of women and men who really want to keep their face from photoaging think this, and they put sunscreen all over their face. And a lot of times it has bad ingredients. And I think it's worsening things, right? I think for most of us, we can be in the sun. It's fine as long as everything else is good and the cell membranes are appropriately populated with the right fatty acids. So I think he's probably okay without sunscreen, especially if he's consistently there. Now, again, if you go to Indonesia or you go somewhere really close to the equator, suddenly he's going to have this huge bolus, this big dose of sun. And so will you guys. So there'll be an adjustment period in which you might need to cover him up or keep him out of the sun in the midday. But even here in Costa Rica, when I have friends that come and they're not adapted to the sun, I say, go in the sun from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. or 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. and then stay out of the sun from 10 to 3 and then go in the sun from 3 to 6 at sunset. So those morning and evening sunlights will be good, but not as intense as like the midday sun. So in terms of pollution, gosh, that's a tough one, right? Because it's in the air. So I think about having things like filters in the house that are good filters, and then an air filter in the room. And then when you're outside, the best places in a city are going to be at the coast. So right by the beach, right by the ocean is going to be the best air quality for him. So in terms of the pollution stuff, is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, that's good. We do live like 5 minutes from the beach. So hopefully that's the best we can do for now.
Yeah, that's going to be better.
What about lotion and soap for him?
So I don't really know that he needs lotion per se. I think if he's getting good animal fat, if he's getting egg yolks and fatty steaks or fatty hamburger or, good raw cheese, if he does dairy, then I think he should be fine without lotion. I know there are some kids that seem like they're predisposed to super dry skin. I always wonder if this is an autoimmune thing going on or not, but I'm not sure that he really needs lotion per se. In terms of soaps, oh gosh, I think my mom will shudder if she ever hears this. It's like use the most clean, natural stuff you can for soaps. I don't know if kids really need, you can wash them with like water, but to add the soap to it, it's like it gets more and more disruptive to the skin microbiome and to the microbiome of the hair and all these kind of things. So it's a little tricky. Have you ever tried just bathing him without soap?
So I do that a few days a week, but if like we just went to the zoo or like somewhere I feel like is pretty dirty, then I usually put it in. But he's always like, no soap, no lotion. So I'm like, I don't know if just naturally this is his reaction, and he's right. I'm like, he doesn't like vegetables, he doesn't like soap, he doesn't like sunscreen, he doesn't like lotion. He's very passionate about saying no to all these things. So I'm like, maybe kids are just right and they just get it right. I don't know.
Yeah, I think he may have some intuition there that's really good. So yeah, I wonder if he might have this sense, that he doesn't need soap. So I think you can scrub him real good if you go to the zoo. I'm imagining the dust and all the stuff on him, but the water does pretty darn good for humans, and especially I think that's probably a pretty reasonable thing to just do water. He doesn't need lotion. He probably doesn't need a whole lot of soap. I'm sure parents are cringing listening to this, thinking, "Oh, my kids are going to be like, what's the character from Charlie Brown, Pigpen, with like the big swirling thing of dust?"
Right.
You can let me know if this is a horrible recommendation. I haven't tried this on any of my own children,
Okay.
but I'm pretty sure it would be fine. I think that probably just water, just let him go in the water and splash around and kind of scrub him down. I think it'd be fine. We have this idea. Why do we use soap? We use soap because these molecules in soap disrupt the oils on the skin and help us clean stuff that's stuck in oil. But I think for most of us, if we just scrub and we use a little friction with water, it works just fine. So the point of soap, a lot of it is SDS, sodium dodecyl sulfate, or something like that. It's to disrupt oils, but in the process, it is disrupting our skin's natural sebum and natural oil, right? So our skin has to kind of re-secrete it. Now, if your son is 4 and he's a boy, he might even be able to get away with no shampoo. I'm getting pretty controversial here. I don't use shampoo here in Costa Rica. I just use water. I mean, I guess you go in the ocean, you get the salt water. I use fresh water, which is filtered, and I just wash my hair with that. Women listening to this are just cringing, thinking that's impossible. But if you're gonna use shampoo, think about the ingredients, read the ingredients. But I mean, gosh, this is something that we're going to work on in 2022. My friend and I are trying to build a company that's making good skincare ingredients and stuff that's like really well done from our perspective. And there's just not a whole lot out there, because if you read even the best stuff, there's all these crazy chemicals and things that you're putting in your hair and your skin. It's wild.
And they're all plant-based. So that's the problem I'm running into. So everything that I'm trying to do that is healthy, and the best soaps, or, the most Erewhon, whatever it is, it all has plant-based. So I'm just running into a really hard problem. I don't have any animal fat-based shampoo. So you don't use any soap, any shampoo, any lotion, nothing. That's just your natural glow.
This is the natural Paul. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I also don't use toothpaste. I've talked about this too. So I don't use toothpaste either. I will brush my teeth and I floss, but I just use a brush and I just do like scrubbing in my teeth. And I actually told my sister this when I was home at Christmas. I don't know why I'm so self-conscious about this podcast. It's very personal. I was like, the kids don't need fluoride in their toothpaste. They don't even need toothpaste. Like, my 2-year-old nephew, he's going to eat and swallow that toothpaste. I don't want him swallowing like soap and, polyethylene glycol or whatever they put in toothpaste. And I mean, my 4-year-old niece knows a little better and she can spit it out, but she's still going to get a bunch of that in her mouth. And toothpaste is kind of a scam, in my opinion. I did a podcast with a guy last year, Stephen Lynn. He's a biological dentist. And I think that healthy teeth are not something you get from brushing your teeth. They're something you get from getting enough fat soluble vitamins, things like vitamin K2, vitamin A, vitamin D. And where do we get these? Animal meat, animal organs, and the sun. And so you want to pull the plaque off your teeth, I think, every day, and you want to probably floss when he's old enough, but I don't even think he needs toothpaste. You can just do water and brush, and then that will avoid a lot of fluoride too, which is no good.
Okay. What about makeup for women? Because that's really hard. Like, I'm in an industry where, first of all, I love makeup and I wear it, but then I'm trying to do like better non-chemical ones, but then they're plant-based. And I have very sensitive skin. I have a little bit of like rosacea. I decided not to do the like chemicals that my dermatologist gave me for the rosacea. And I'm like, I'm not so into it. But what about makeup? How harmful is it? How do you combat it? Is it something that should be more avoided if you can?
The good thing about makeup, presumably, is that it's in smaller places, right? It's just like a smaller area of your face. And I haven't,
It's
What's
like,
that? It's your whole
like a
face.
face mask. Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. So I guess it depends what's in it. So the main concern I would have with makeup would be, what are the chemicals, right? How much are you absorbing in your skin? Where are they based? If it's plant-based makeup, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad per se, unless it's full of high linoleic acid oils, and then you're getting them back on your skin. So my hope is really for a lot of people that if they change their diet, that things will improve from the inside out, right? I've always kind of wondered about this. I don't understand so much, and the women listening to this will probably correct me, like why women use like a base coat and a concealer. I'm just like, they look better without it. Like these women they're all beautiful, just who they are. They don't need all this stuff on their face. Occasionally, women I'm around will want to use like mascara or something. And I don't even know what's in these things. I haven't even looked, but I would be careful about the labels and obviously try and use the cleanest stuff you can. It's a little difficult for me to answer the question because I don't have a label here to like look and be like, oh yeah, that's actually not very good. You don't want that stuff. But I'm sure there's better ones out there. And then maybe in the future, if we can really do a deep dive on the skincare company, we could branch over to the makeup side and make some like really good ones. Who knows? It'll be challenging because it's like sorcery, right? You have to make these things a certain texture and a certain color, and it's very complex chemistry.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you'd also asked about food for your son. I can
Yes.
speak to that real quickly so we don't lose it. I recommend to my sister that she feed her kids an animal-based diet. I think that kids naturally gravitate toward two food groups, and those are meat and fruit. And so that's great. Like if you give kids meat and fruit, generally they will eat it. And I think that's a great base diet for most kids. And there's, I've seen both my niece and nephew struggle a little bit with textures and, how salty it is and how well they can chew it. But I think if you can figure that stuff out for the kids, depending on how old they are, most of them, like you said, they'll love meat and they will love fruit. And you can even combine them. You can even add a little bit of honey to a 4-year-old's food. The one caveat about honey for kids is that you don't want to give raw honey to any baby less than 1 year old because of clostridial spores. But once kids are 2 or 3 or 4, they can do a little bit of honey. And, I actually was told this anecdote by a friend of mine who was with his nephew, and his sister was trying to feed him chicken. He was trying to feed his nephew chicken. And the chicken, it can be really dry. There's not a lot of fat. Kids are going to clue into the same things we are clued into, which is the appropriate amount of fat in the meat. If meat is too lean, it just doesn't taste good to us as humans. But if it has 10 or 15 or 20% fat, we really like it, especially with a little bit of salt. It's perfect for us as humans. And so I think that if your kids are not eating the meat, you can always add a little bit of like grass-fed butter if they tolerate dairy, or a little bit of honey. And then if you're using raw honey, that's a pretty darn good ingredient. I think that honey is healthy for humans, and a little bit of raw butter with that will really make things more palatable. Now, if you use red meat, a lot of times you'll solve the problem because red meat's going to have a little more fat in it, but chicken can get really dry and boring, and kids are going to have that reaction. Like, I don't really want just straight protein. It's kind of not that interesting, but protein plus fat plus salt sounds amazing, especially when it's really good quality. And then to add that, I think kids need carbohydrates, and they're going to benefit from something like fruit of any type that they like. I mean, oranges, bananas, strawberries, blueberries. My niece and nephew love that stuff. And I'm sure that there's a lot of ways you can do stuff with that. My sister will sometimes make smoothies where she will even mix in. So the one piece of the equation that sometimes gets left out for my niece and nephew is organs, because I think my family is struggling to just get them to eat enough all the time without them getting distracted. And so the organs can go into like the fruit sometimes too. You can make a smoothie and either take like the desiccated capsules, we make it hard in soil, and just empty those, a couple of the capsules a day, into like some applesauce, or a smoothie for the kid is great, or just mix it into something or sprinkle it on. I mean, they're not going to like the dry powder, but you can sprinkle it on. Some kids actually I've seen will just eat the dry powder out of the capsules and they really like it. But the desiccated organs can be really helpful for kids if you mix it in stuff, and then they can get the organs that way. It'll be helpful. And then some kids can do dairy. I'm a fan of raw dairy, like cheeses. My niece and nephew love cheese, and I try to encourage my sister to use raw cheeses. I just like the quality of the raw cheese, or a grass-fed cheese better. But a lot of things can be solved with a little bit of raw cheese, a little bit of honey, and a little bit of butter.
So I think there's two things I'm battling with this. So he does have the Force of Nature ancestral blend, which is great because it has the liver and the heart and like a few things like that. So he is getting a lot of those organs. I'm going to add it in there. It's just hard when he is at school or we're on the road and I don't want to completely deprive him of having, like cheddar bunnies sometimes, or is he going to have a lollipop? Is he going to have some ice cream? So it's just finding that balance too, because I'm like, I don't want to deprive him and have him feel like he's not getting all these things, because I already don't give him like Doritos and all these things his friends constantly are having. And I'm always saying, no, we'll go get you a healthier version of it. So then I go to Erewhon and I get a healthier version of, the Siete chips, or, something like that. So I'm still giving him these things, but it's just like, how do you really moderate that? What is the effect? Like if he does have a lollipop, how do I combat that? How often is that okay? So I just also am balancing trying to be the best mom and give him the best experiences. Like I want to take him at the hot summer day to get some ice cream or have some pizza sometimes. So, and you're not home all the time. Like it's easier to feed him in a very contained environment and when you're here. But like a lot of the times we're on the go and there's only certain things, then okay, he's only going to eat the chicken fingers or the burger with fries. And so how do you balance that, and what is an amount that's okay? And then how do you recover from that?
This is a tough question.
It's hard.
I'm not sure how to answer this one. And I'm almost, I'll give you my perspective on it, but take it with a grain of salt, because I haven't really lived it with my own children and I haven't been in these experiences, and I want to maintain sensitivity and empathy for that. So that the upside of what you're saying is clear. There's definitely times when things are less convenient and you're traveling or you're on the go or you're at an amusement park and there's not something available. What do you do? So I see the benefits of it sometimes. The downside is something that's it's hard for me to qualify, because so when I went home for Christmas, I saw my mom and my dad, my sister and her husband, and my niece and my nephew. And my mom was, she was saying, it's Christmas, we're going to have some treats. My family's generally pretty good about eating food, because they talk to me sometimes and they read some of my stuff or they get my newsletters or whatever. And they kind of know how I feel about food. So she knew that like the hummus with beans, with chickpeas, and like definitely with seed oils isn't really something that I'm a fan of. And she said, well, it's the holidays. And I kind of, part of me thinks like, okay, it's the holidays. And when we do that for kids and we do that for ourselves, it makes it harder to go back, right? Because I know for the kids, when you give them the hummus, like my parents started giving the kids provolone cheese, or provolone, I don't know how you want to pronounce it, and now when my niece goes over to their house, all she wants is provolone cheese. And it's not the worst thing in the world because it's provolone cheese, but it's not a raw cheese. It's probably not the best quality cheese. It's got to be a little more processed. So I think that what I saw was that the more that they gave in and made special treats, the more that was what the kids were seeking. And they had more of these. I think that parents, this is my perspective, so parents can just say, Paul, you're full of it. Just don't talk. But I think that when you do that, you just have to be prepared to set boundaries on the backside. And so parents, it's like, there's no free lunch, right? If you want to give your son pizza or you want to give him the cheddar bunnies, 10%, 20% of his diet is probably not that big a deal unless he has a really strong gluten allergy. But you have to be prepared to set boundaries on the backside and realize that every time you do that, he's going to want more. And so the parents have to be able to hold a hard line and say, no, you are only going to get these good foods when we can control them. And so what I told my sister was, if the kids won't eat the good food when you can control it, when you can give it to them, just let them not eat. They will eventually eat. And I think people say, oh, they're going to call CPS on you, or you're going to get in trouble, or your kids are going to get taken away. No, I think that like kids will not go more than 1 or 2 meals without eating. But I think that this is just my admonition to parents. And again, it's with the big asterisk, like Paul doesn't have kids. Paul hasn't done this, but I've seen it in my sister's kids, is like when you give them the cheddar bunnies, just expect that on the back end at dinner, he's going to want cheddar bunnies and you have to say no. And then if he won't eat anything but cheddar bunnies, then you have to decide like, okay, am I going to give in the slippery slope? Or are you going to say, okay, this is all that's available for you today, and just try and get them back on track with strong, firm, but loving boundaries. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a tricky one.
It is tricky. Okay. Let me see what else. All right. This one is just for me. So how bad really is caffeine and wine? So I've been a really big Earl Grey fan, like my whole life. I'm obsessed with Earl Grey. I have one every morning. It's like my treat. I have some raw, milk in it with honey. That's like it for me, like one of my favorite things in the world. And then I was listening with you, and my husband's very big into espresso. So I've been trying to just, especially for this month, just have the espresso because I researched it too. And one is beans and one is leaves. And, so I'm like, okay, well, just try the espresso. And then also on the other note of that, I have been trying to get pregnant for a year. So then I was listening to that lady on your podcast. I'm sorry, I forget her name, the doctor, the OBGYN,
Jamie Seaman.
Jamie Seaman. And she's like, well, you should just cut all that out. And I'm like, I have a 4-year-old who sometimes still doesn't sleep. I have 4 dogs. I'm trying to run a business. Like, I don't know if I can do that and it like exist off of that. So I've been trying to do like a little bit or like every other day. And then same with wine. Like I'm just so wound up all day and I have so much going on that it's just so nice to have a glass of biodynamic, organic wine with my husband at the end of the night and watch a movie or whatever, or talk and just kind of like relax and have that time. I'm also a really big foodie. That's why this has been a little more challenging for me because I'm obsessed with food. I love food. I grew up in a restaurant. My husband and I, we both are like big foodies and we love wine. So how bad are those for you? And what is the ideal? And do you have either ever?
So I don't have either ever, although I'll tell you this. I'm in Costa Rica. I was in Costa Rica for New Year's and I spent some time. I have some friends here who are really into wine. And so there were a couple of bottles of wine that came out. There was a 2005 Chateau Mouton Rothschild and a 1990 Chateau Latour. And these are the best bottles of wine that I'll ever have in my whole life. So I had a sip, but really people would joke if they saw me drinking this wine. Like I literally had a sip just to taste it. But I want to be honest. Like I had a sip of wine. I wanted to taste these wines. They were freaking amazing, but that was all I drank. It's just me. Like, but I think I'm a little bit of an alien here. Like my brain is programmed so that I don't ever do these things. So I don't do coffee. I don't do wine. I really had like less than like a sip because I wanted to taste it, but that was it on those wines. And I haven't had alcohol probably in 10 or 12 years. It just doesn't serve me. So I think that this is where we get into these areas of grayness and difficulty. And I think that if you are doing 90% right, then you're really doing good. And I want to make that clear up front. Like people say like, well, what if I have a little bit of this or a little bit of that? That's not going to undo all the benefits. Like if you're doing something 90% well, you're still getting a ton of benefits. That doesn't mean, however, that the caffeine is not having a negative effect or that the wine is not having a negative effect. And I think we are all sovereign individuals. And I've always tried to not be preachy and tell people like, that's bad, don't do that. I think you just have to kind of set the meter where you want it to be and figure out what works best for you in terms of how it maximizes your quality of life. It's something I've talked about in the past in my book and other spaces. Like ultimately, this is all about increasing your quality of life. Like the reason I do this is so that you and other people listening will feel better, right? They'll be stronger, better body composition, more energy, more mental clarity, better sleep, better libido, just able to do things in your life better. And for some people, drinking a cup of Earl Grey with milk and honey or having a glass of wine with their spouse at night is a real big part of their quality of life. And so I don't want to say you can't do that. Just understand that it's probably going to affect you somewhat negatively. And you just have to be honest with that and see how you can manage it and maximize your quality of life. But I do want to just point out this pattern. It's like, it's interesting to hear you say you're doing all these things. You've got 4 dogs, you've got this 4-year-old son, you're managing a business. You have to go with caffeine. And then you almost need the wine to like counteract the caffeine at night. So there is a little bit of a pattern developing here where it's like something to ramp you up and then something to bring you back down. And I think a lot of people do this and this is our lives, but sometimes those can be counterproductive. And if you didn't do the caffeine as much, you might not need as much wine. It's like there is a way to kind of find the balance, but it's tricky in every life. I'm not sure if that answers your question satisfactorily.
It does. I think even if I didn't have the caffeine in the morning, I would still want the wine at night. It's just so much you're dealing with. And I think that is another thing. Like when I first got pregnant that first month, right? Like I was eating pretty healthy. I mean, not like no plants. I wasn't eating a carnivore diet, but it just in general, I was having wine a few, times a week, but I just didn't have stress. We were living in Santa Barbara. We weren't running a company. So then this time trying to get pregnant, it's been a year. And we were filming a TV show and that was really high stress because it's reality TV and you have producers and people attacking your character on TV and then sleep deprivation and dealing with a 4-year-old who's crying when you leave and like, balancing that and then so I just feel like I have a lot on my plate, which is probably stress and stressful and isn't helpful. And then I've been trying to be like, well, what can I control and what can I help? And so I've been really dialing in on this carnivore diet, which we've been on for about 2 weeks, honestly. I mean, we've always had meat within it, but just trying to do, like you're saying, 90%. Like, it was New Year's, I had a little bit of champagne. I was like, I'll restart. I'm going to restart. I keep restarting. But just in general, yeah, like 95% of the time I've been really on it and not having any plants, which has been, a lot for me. But I didn't know if that caffeine or that wine, that one, or how, whatever it is, does drastically affect fertility, like that doctor said. But I didn't know if it is 90% of what you're doing, if that's okay, or if that might have a huge effect on it.
It's hard to say. I think there's probably
time ago.
What's that?
But it didn't a long time ago, but maybe I'm just older now.
There's that. And there's probably, I think the stress is probably the biggest component, stress and sleep. I would imagine that a little bit of caffeine in the morning and one glass of wine at night is probably not the biggest factor. I think it's probably stress and sleep are the main things. And so optimizing those with whatever you can do, whether it's like sauna or cold plunge or meditation or however you can relax and optimize the sleep. I know having a 4-year-old that probably wakes up sometimes, and just optimizing the sleep, I think will be the biggest thing for the overall fertility. And then maybe I can ask you, how are the first 2 weeks going on animal-based? That's my dog sneezing in the background.
God bless you. Actually, yeah. Really well. And it's actually changed my palate. I love the roe eggs. I've had those for like a year, but I didn't think I could have them without the pita chips. And then I saw your whole thing on pita chips and, in the grocery store, and I was like, okay, let me just try to cut it out. So it's amazing how your palate really kind of can shift as well. And my son loves this diet and naturally eats that way. So it's made it easier to cook home meals, but I felt really energized. Like today I didn't have any coffee, but I love the fire starters. I've been having those in the morning, and the supplements and the organs. And I've been feeling like I actually have a lot more energy. I've been sleeping pretty well too. I mean, when I'm not woken up. And I think it's really awakening. I keep kind of having a little bit of anxiety about missing out on nutrients. I'm like, am I missing the broccoli? Like, am I missing this? So I also listened to something you said, and I wanted to reconfirm I heard this right, for in layman's terms, that someone did a study, right? And then the amount of nutrients that they had from just eating meat and the amount they ate with vegetables, there was no difference, right? So they don't add nutrients. Like, I'm really not missing nutrients by not eating these things, right?
I don't think you're missing nutrients. So I can address this in a little more detail. In terms of vitamins and minerals, you're getting everything in spades with meat and organs and fruit. You're getting plenty of everything. I mean, like the minerals, whatever, your zinc, iron, selenium, copper, manganese, magnesium, you're getting tons of those in fruit and organs and meat. So the minerals, vitamins A, D, E, K. I mean, D is basically from the sun, but A, E, K, K2 especially, the menaquinones, and then all the water soluble vitamins, the full spectrum of B vitamins, everything from thiamine to riboflavin to folate to B6 to pantothenic acid to biotin to B12. This whole range of B vitamins is just, they're all so much more represented in animal foods, especially the meat and the organs. When you add the fruit to it, you're getting all the vitamin C, if that's a concern. And then there's all these other nutrients in animal foods that you don't get in plant foods. I don't think you were ever really leaning toward the plant foods, but if you exclude the animal foods, then you miss things like creatine, choline, carnitine, carnosine, anserine, taurine, K2, B12. So there's just so much nutrition in the animal foods plus fruit. Adding the fruit helps because then you don't go into ketosis. A lot of people benefit from ketosis short term, but then run into electrolyte issues long term with ketosis. And so the thing that people would argue you're missing with an animal-based diet without eating vegetables, that is leaves or stems, is like these quote unquote phytonutrients. But I've debated, they're not really nutrients. There's these phytochemicals, but what I want to raise the public awareness about is that these phytochemicals are actually usually defense chemicals. They're usually built by the plant to dissuade people from eating them. And the benefits or the purported benefits of these plant chemicals are often redundant. You can get them in other ways. So specifically when you're saying, oh, I need to eat the broccoli to get the chemicals in broccoli. One of the most famous ones in broccoli is sulforaphane. And the benefits of sulforaphane, when it's studied in isolation, are protecting DNA from damage. And the way it does that is by increasing our body's glutathione, which is an endogenous antioxidant. But there are lots of ways to increase your glutathione, right? If you exercise, if you go in the sun, if you go in a sauna, if you go in a cold plunge, all of those will also increase your glutathione. Eating meat will increase your glutathione because it gives you the building blocks that you need to make glutathione. So the way that sulforaphane increases your glutathione is by being a little bit of a pro-oxidant. We've heard that these things are antioxidants, but they're pro-oxidants acutely, meaning they cause oxidative stress, and then your body has this incredible ability to respond to it. I think there's a misunderstanding in the public awareness, probably promulgated by the media, that these compounds directly are antioxidants. And 99% of the time, that's not true. The sulforaphane isn't the antioxidant. The sulforaphane is the pro-oxidant, and then your body is responding, making more glutathione. So if you just give your body a little bit of a pulse, right? If you give your body some sort of a pro-oxidant, whether it's sunlight or exercise or cold or hot, your body will do the same thing. It'll turn on the same pathways. Even fasting will do it. Ketosis will do it, skipping a meal, and overnight fast. And so you're absolutely right. There are studies where they compare groups of people, and these are not even the perfectly done studies. These are probably people eating a standard or semi-standard American diet, and they'll compare one group with vegetables and one group with reduced vegetables or no vegetables. And there are multiple studies that show no differences in DNA damage markers, lymphocyte, activation, immune activation, inflammatory markers. And so you think, like, what are the vegetables actually doing for us as humans? Now, I want to be careful to clarify something as well. Vegetables are better than junk food. I tweeted this the other day, vegetables are better than junk food. So if you take someone who's eating a junk food diet and you give them a bunch of vegetables, yeah, they're going to do better. But I don't think vegetables are better than meat and organs and fruit and raw dairy and honey. I think those are the foods that humans have always sought. So, and we see this in the hunter-gatherer tribes. It's kind of intrinsic to us as humans. Like, your son knows this. If you put a plate of all these things in front of your son, like maybe some honey and some meat and some fruit, and then you gave him like some raw broccoli and a little bit of raw kale and, like some raw asparagus or even some, like, what he's going to, like, we know what he's going to go for. He's going to be like, why, what is that? Like, I can do the same thing with my dog, even though my dog's not a human, but it's the same experiment done over and over. It's like, if you and I are in a tribe and we're out hunting in the woods, we're going to try and kill an animal and eat it and share it with the tribe. We're going to eat it from nose to tail, which is why the organs are so important, either fresh or desiccated. And then if we see a piece of brightly colored sweet fruit, we're going to go eat that. And if we find a beehive, we're going to find somebody in the tribe who can make a fire and smoke the bees out, and we're going to eat all this honey, and we're just going to be super happy. We're really not going to go looking for like bitter leaves. It's just so interesting. Like, the whole reason humans have bitter taste is to tell us there's a toxin in that thing you're eating. It's just this intrinsic thing that we've become so confused about, because kale has an amazing publicist, but we've been sold, kind of this bill of goods, this is Pied Piper of kale story, where it's like, the kale isn't really that good. It's this bitter leaf. And you think about just walking around the forest eating leaves. Hunter-gatherers don't generally do this. They may have certain leaves they know won't kill them, and they might eat them if they're starving, but a lot of times they're heavily fermented or massively cooked and majorly detoxified. So you just have to remember there's a lot of defense chemicals in those plants. And then furthermore, I actually did a podcast with a guy last year, Stefan Van Vliet, and the more pasture raised, the more grass fed, the more grass finished, the higher quality the meat is. Some of these phytochemicals actually end up in the meat. And the hope is that, the cow is doing the process of detoxifying the meat. And so chemicals that may or may not be beneficial for us end up in the grass-fed meat. So it's like you almost have a salad built into the meat as well. If you're eating good quality meat, that's kind of like even taking care of that argument on the other side, because it's like, well, if you really believe that you want some of those chemicals, there are some of them in meat, and hopefully the cow has done the process of getting rid of the defense chemicals and the bad chemicals for you. And then some of these other chemicals actually end up in the meat. Stefan Van Vliet described it as you can almost marinate the meat from the inside out, depending on the quality. So the higher quality meat actually has some phytochemicals in it. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's so funny. I thought that the other day. I'm like, well, really, animals eat the leaves. And so I really am getting leaves from the animals. And so that's very funny.
And they're more adapted to doing it. People always, I'll just interject this. I didn't mean to interrupt you. The animals are more adapted to doing it. So people will sometimes say like, well, how, if plant leaves are so bad, how can cows and moose or, like whatever, eat these things? And it's like, well, my first question is, do you have 4 stomachs? and okay, you don't have four stomachs, you don't have a rumen, and you also don't have a liver of a cow. You don't have this liver that's built to sort of detoxify those things. So herbivores, whether it's a brontosaurus, and hundreds of millions of years ago, or a cow or a buffalo or a bison or a deer, they've been on this path for millions of years of eating these plants and sort of detoxifying them. Most people will understand that as humans, we took the sort of a sharp right turn or a left turn away from our primate lineage over 2 million years ago, and we became mostly meat eaters or predominantly meat eaters. And that's a very strong case can be made that was a real reason that the human brain developed the way it did. So though we have come from more herbivorous primates, I think that we're probably less adapted to those defense chemicals now than our primate ancestors were. And there's plenty of examples in the animal kingdom of animals over consuming certain plants and dying or getting very sick. So it's not that the animals eat these plants with no repercussions. There's so many examples that people never hear about in the farming industry, like when animals have been herded into certain paddocks or they've been forced to overeat a certain plant, that they all die or they all get really sick if they overconsume certain plants. So the thing that we don't understand is that maybe a cow isn't the best example, a sheep or some other grazing animal, a wild deer, they're not just eating everything in full unrestricted amounts. They're eating small amounts of little things because they don't want to overwhelm their body's ability to detoxify certain chemicals. Whereas with humans, we've decided that kale is the best thing since sliced bread. It's probably not the most appropriate, likeness to say right now, but you know what I'm saying. And so we are eating, when I was a vegan, I used to eat 2 pounds of kale a day. That's completely not evolutionarily consistent. No wonder I had horrible gas and irritability and all kinds of issues. So, it's a pretty tough thing. And then when you go to the grocery store and you look at the plants, it's only really a few plant species because you think, okay, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, kale, what else? Broccolini, broccoli rabe. Like there's so many plants that are all the same plant. That's all one plant. And we think oh, I had variety. I ate broccoli today and cauliflower the next day. And then I had some Brussels sprouts. Well, you had the same plant every single day, right? So there's so many plants that are all the same plant. And then we think, okay, potato, tomato, green pepper, red pepper, a lot of those are the same family of plants. So then again, you're concentrating the defense chemicals. In white potato, you've got things called chaconines, which are problematic in the Solanaceae family. So we're not eating from different families, and animals that are herbivorous are so much more in tune with this. They're eating little bits of plants so they don't overwhelm themselves and die. Fred Provenza is somebody that's talked about this. But as humans, we think, oh, the more kale, the better, the more spinach, the better. Just go. If you have any medical issue, it's because you're not eating enough spinach or kale. And in fact, that usually just leads to lots of gas and kidney stones. So that hopefully is helpful.
Yeah, it's so hard when you grow up hearing something, right? And like you say, I know the power of the media, myself being in it, of how so much of it's just a story, right? It's like who's benefiting from this, who's selling the t-shirt with it, with the this, with the that. It's like, so I do know how so much of media is just spun, and then they change and it's a storyline. And so it's interesting being on the inside of that and growing up with those foods being on, so many commercials, and then being told, like you said, the publicist of kale, I think, is so incredibly accurate. So another thing about this diet, 2 questions. How much fruit should I or my son be having a day? Like Spencer's like, I haven't lost any weight. I'm like, first of all, you're having so much freaking honey. I think when Paul says have honey, maybe it's like a spoonful. I think you're having like 5 spoonfuls a day. It's still sugar. Yeah, it's different sugar. And I listen to that whole thing, how it is different sugar, but still you're getting so many calories from it if you're trying to lose weight and you're eating rice and a few other things. So and fruit, I'm like, I think you're having too much fruit. And he's like, no, Paul says to eat fruit. And I'm like, yeah, maybe like a banana with, maybe some strawberries later or a few of them, but like not with every meal, and you don't need a whole avocado or like, so what do you recommend for fruit portions?
It's going to be different for every individual. And I think everybody's going to come to like the weight loss, body composition thing a little differently. For Spencer, I heard you say something that I'll point out. So if he's eating rice along with all that stuff, then I would cut out the rice and keep the fruit and the honey and see if that helps. Specifically, I've found, at least anecdotally, working with people, that rice is good for weight gain. And like, if you want to build muscle and you want to gain weight, rice is good for that. Rice is not great for weight loss. And I don't know what it is. Like, once you get into rice, you just have crossed the boundary into a grain. So now, and we're doing this animal-based 30 this month. There's an infographic people can get if they sign up at animalbased30.com. And on the infographic, I've tried to build like, okay, these are the green foods, and that's fruit and honey and raw dairy and meat and organs. That's the ideal foods. And then you move into like the middle, because I want people to have some gray area. That's things like sweet potatoes and rice, white rice. And then the red is like, okay, all the other grains like oats and wheat and those kind of things are probably much more problematic for people. But I do think that white rice and even sweet potatoes can be problematic for some people. So if he's having trouble losing weight, I would think hard about those things and really get into like the minutia of the diet, like how much alcohol is he drinking? Because we know that's going to cause weight gain. It's just those calories just end up, we gain the weight from the alcohol calories. If we don't oxidize them, it's just a clear weight gain for alcohol. And then get rid of the rice and then see if that helps. But I think that depending on the individual and the health of the thyroid, which is another thing to make sure the thyroid is healthy, you can be actually kind of liberal with the fruit and see what you need. I probably eat more fruit than the average person because I'm surfing for 3 hours a day. And then after this, I'm going to go to the gym and get a workout. So I will eat 3 to 4 bananas a day. I will eat 3 tablespoons of honey a day. I'll eat a papaya in a day. If I have an avocado, I'll eat a whole avocado a day. I would say in terms of total carbohydrate grams, I'm somewhere around 150 grams of carbohydrates a day for me. And then maybe 150-ish, 175 grams of protein. And then maybe I think probably with fat, it's somewhere around 120, 130 grams of fat. I don't get super critical and count it. I want it to be more intuitive for people and just to have them go by feel. But you want your meat to have some fat in it. You want to make sure that you're getting enough carbohydrates to feel good with whatever exercise you're doing. And then you want to make sure to get some organs, and then it should fall into place. And if you're not losing weight, a couple of things: check your thyroid. That would be a TSH, free T4, free T3. Make sure that's good. Make sure you're sleeping well. Think about alcohol, and then think about getting rid of things like rice. Or if there's dairy that's not raw, some people react to that too. It sounds like just a minute detail, but I had somebody message me on Instagram the other day, and they said, I'm having a lot of mucus production with this animal-based diet. And I said, well, are you doing dairy and is it raw? And she said, oh, I love my cheese, but it's not raw. And then she cut it out and it was way better for her. This is just an anecdote, but the mucus for her got a lot better when she was not doing raw dairy. So sometimes people will do they'll do like regular Parmesan cheese that's not Parmigiano Reggiano, it's not raw cheese. Who knows? I don't mean this to be voodoo hand waving stuff with the raw, but I react differently to raw dairy versus regular dairy. People could also try cutting out dairy completely and get calcium from something like Bone Matrix or one of the other bone meals, because I do think calcium is helpful for humans. Is that at least a start?
Yeah. So speaking of the supplements, are those the only supplements you're taking? Because Spencer has like 100 supplements and he was always trying to get me to take them. And I have a problem swallowing pills personally. Like, it's very challenging for me. I know I can open the capsules, and I tried to eat it raw and it didn't go so well, but I am swallowing them. I do eat the fire starters raw. I just kind of chew those. Spencer's like, Paul said they're candy. And so I really thought they were going to be sweet. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's like large, Spencer. And like, I like it now actually, but the shock at first. Are those the only supplements you take? And what would you recommend? Like, do you start the morning with fire starters, Bone Matrix? Like, if you have hypothetically all your supplements, which we do, how would you regulate those through the day, through the week? And then would you add like a multivitamin or do you not do that?
I don't do a multivitamin. Those are the only things I take that could be considered quote unquote supplements. I don't even think of them as supplements because they're just freeze dried food. So it's kind of like, like the highest quality astronaut food made in, organs. So they're basically food in a capsule. Anytime you put in a capsule, people think it's a supplement. But I mean, you could call it a supplement, but generally I think of it as food. But yeah, that's all I take other than food. So I start the day when I surf. I'll get up about 5:30. I'll be in the water by 6:30. And between those two, I do a little bit of movement. I drink a couple of coconuts. I saw you drinking a coconut earlier. I drink a couple of coconuts, and I have maybe a banana and some papaya. So all the vegans listening to this, you guys listen. I'm a vegan until I eat breakfast. I'm giving a shout out to that. So I have a little bit of fruit in the morning before I surf, and I usually do fine. I can surf for 3 or 4 hours. Then I come home 10:30, 11. I have breakfast, which is grass-fed beef, organs, raw liver, heart. I'll have some desiccated testicle or some fresh testicle if I have it. sometimes some desiccated brain. And then I have fruit, a little bit more fruit, sometimes a little bit of raw yogurt or raw cheese and honey. And that's pretty much the meal that I repeat then for dinner. And that's all I do in the day. So I don't do, what do people commonly do? I don't do magnesium. I don't take any magnesium supplement. I don't take any electrolytes other than the salt that I put on my food. And I generally like Maldon salt here in Costa Rica, although Redmond real salt is pretty good too. And then I don't take glycine. I don't take collagen because I'm getting connective tissue in the meat, and I'm eating the heart with like all the sinew and the chewy bits. So I like, if people are not getting chewy bits in their food, and you're cutting out, if you're one of the people that like cuts out the steak and cuts out the chewy bits, then you may need a little more collagen, like the skin, hair, and nails, or another type of collagen supplement. But I don't do any of that stuff. I'm trying to think what other supplements people take. I don't take vitamin D because I'm out in the sun. So I just basically do desiccated organs to fill in the gaps that I can't get in my diet. When I'm traveling, I'll do more desiccated liver or desiccated heart. But yeah, it's working. It works great for me. I think that most people don't need the gaggle of supplements. It makes their life easier. A lot of people don't want to swallow pills. I think, again, we intuitively know this is something we don't necessarily want to do. And the fire starter is meant to be a help for people who can't get as much fat. It's just like the special high stearic acid tallow in a capsule, and you can chew it. It's not sweet, but it's like a little bit, people get used to it. They kind of like it. Kids like it too. It's like a carnivore jelly bean. And we joked, at Heart and Soil, we even had like, you could put a little honey on the outside and then you could make it sweet and your kids could chew. It's like carnivore jelly bean, but it's a little hard. Sometimes kids like it, sometimes they don't, but it's a fun thing. So yeah, I think you can get all that stuff throughout the day, but any other supplements you can think of, I don't take them, but we could talk about them if you want.
So if you have all of your products, would you take all of them every day if you're not eating like the raw, or would you just take one a day? Like, how would you pace out all the Heart and Soil ones?
Yeah, good question. So every once in a while I see somebody post on Instagram and they have like 6 of our supplements. I think, okay, so there's a couple of different categories, right? Fire starter is like the special fat. So that's something you could take every day. Bone matrix is the ground up bone, the microcrystalline hydroxyapatite. That's a special one as well. That's something you could take every day if you're not doing dairy, to get a non-dairy source of calcium. And then the rest of them are like different combinations of organs. And in terms of that, if people have like 6 or 7 of the different organ combinations, I'll say pick 2 and take 6 capsules of each, and then rotate to another 2 the next day, and then rotate to another 2 the next day, and then rotate to another 2 the next day. If you have 6 of our organ supplements, like if you have gut and digestion, and you have beef organs, and you have bone marrow and liver, and you have whole package, and you have skin, hair, and nails, you don't have to take all of those in one day. You can just rotate between them every day, and you'll get a little bit, one day you'll get more tripe and intestine, and one day in beef organs, you'll get more kidney, spleen, and pancreas, and the next day you'll get a little more the trachea and scapula cartilage from skin, hair, and nails. And then another day, you'll get a little extra testicle and blood in the whole package, or the her package, or the lifeblood. So yeah, you can just rotate. Like two of the organ supplements a day is generally a sweet spot for people. You can do more, but that would be 12 capsules of the organs. But then in addition to like the bone matrix and the fire starter, if you're trying to really fully combine it all.
Is her package coming back? I'm on the wait list. I'm like, where is this supplement that I keep hearing about?
I'm so excited for that one to come back. I was talking to the team. It looks like it's going to be back hopefully in January. Okay. If you're on the wait list, if you guys are listening and you want to get on the wait list, you can go to heartandsoil.co and go to her package and then just put your name on the wait list. But we're hoping to have it back. It's been a tough one, but it's a really popular one. So we're excited to get her package back. For people that don't know, her package is liver and I believe bone marrow plus, actually it's liver and kidney, plus the uterus, ovaries, and fallopian tubes for women. So we put the kidney in there because of like UTIs and kidney infections, and liver is just supportive in general. And then obviously the reproductive organs probably have unique benefits for women. So I think it hopefully will be back in January, but we'll let everybody who's on the Notify Me list know, and we'll talk about it.
Okay. I ate some raw liver the other day. I just had to do the challenge, right? And it was okay. I was like, all right, I do like carpaccio. I'm just going to pretend it's carpaccio, that I'm just eating. Is it as beneficial to eat it semi-cooked or seared, or is it better just to eat it raw? I was nervous. I was like, am I going to get sick and die? Is this okay? And I was like, oh no, it's fine. I'm sure it's fine.
You did fine with it, right?
I did. Nothing happened. It was great.
I've eaten a lot of raw liver in my life. I've never gotten sick from raw liver. I have gotten sick from raw spleen. I think that there's always a risk when you eat raw organs. I eat raw liver now every day. I try to make sure it's from a good source. You can always pre-freeze it, but there's always a risk of eating a raw organ. So if people are concerned about that, you can't you can sear the outside lightly and it's still going to be pretty beneficial. It's one of the benefits of the desiccated organs is that the freeze drying process is going to remove any of the contaminants also, and the freeze drying preserves a lot of the nutrients, or as many as possible. So I think that the desiccation or lightly searing, if you're worried about it, but if you want to get adventurous, most people are fine with raw, though there's always a risk of that. But it's kind of fun. I mean, I've eaten a lot of like raw testicle. I always eat testicle raw. It's a party trick. Whenever I have it, I bring it over. I brought it to a party here the other day, and all my friends were gross. Like, what is that? And I was cutting it up, and I think I got almost everyone to eat it. One girl spit it out, but mostly everyone ate the raw testicle. So I've never gotten sick from raw testicle, but yeah, you just have to know your sourcing and stuff. And a little bit of searing isn't going to destroy it. I always sear the heart a little bit if I'm going to eat that, but raw heart's good too.
Okay. I have like two other questions, then I'll let you go because I know I'm sure you have a lot going on. What about bacon? Are the nitrates in there? Okay, like I get a really good source of the bacon. I don't know if there are nitrates and everything. Like, can you have bacon every day, right? It's just animal fat. Do you?
Well, this is a good question. So a couple of things with bacon. It depends what the pigs are eating. So this is another thing that we should actually think about for weight loss for people. So if we're really trying to have people lose weight, I recommend higher stearic acid, like found in tallow and fire starter, and lower linoleic acid in the diet. And because pigs and chickens are monogastric animals, they accumulate polyunsaturated fatty acids. So if you feed a pig or a chicken grains, which 98% of pigs and chickens are fed, their fat is going to have more linoleic acid. So this is one of the reasons I'm not a huge fan of avocado oil and olive oil, especially for people that are trying to lose weight. Is this is just an observation, but I suspect that the more linoleic acid in your diet, whether it's from avocado oil, olive oil, pork fat, chicken fat, which is going to be significantly higher than tallow, which is ruminant fat. So like cow fat, probably 2% linoleic acid, chicken fat, pork fat, olive oil, avocado oil, 15 to 20% linoleic acid. I think that can stall weight loss. So if somebody's really trying to lose weight, like Spencer is or something, I would be careful to avoid bacon. And I would focus mostly on, either lean chicken, lean pork, and beef, or just beef and bison. I never get bored of beef. That's 99.9% of what I eat is just grass-fed, grass-finished beef here in Costa Rica, and it's low linoleic acid. So I think you just have to be a little careful with that, and it's something that bears in. It just is important to consider. And I've heard so many anecdotes now. I think it was last year or maybe 2 years ago in 2020. I had Brad Marshall on my podcast, and we talked a lot about stearic acid and polyunsaturated fatty acids. And he had a case of somebody that he knew who had also kind of been stalled with weight loss on keto, probably eating a lot of almond butters and, things that are slightly higher linoleic acid. And they went to a low linoleic acid, higher stearic acid diet, and the weight really started to come off. So I think that there's that ratio between linoleic acid and stearic acid in the human diet. And the more stearic acid and the less linoleic acid is going to promote, I would say, healthy weight and leanness. And then you can go the other direction. Less stearic acid, more linoleic acid is kind of going to go the other direction. So again, linoleic acid sources would be seed oils, corn, canola, safflower, sunflower, soybean, but also conventionally fed pork and chicken. And then avocado oil and olive oil are not as bad as seed oils, but still have much more linoleic acid than something like a tallow or a beef fat. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. So if you eat the same beef, basically, hypothetically, every day, that's really high quality. You could just eat the same thing 3 meals a day with some fruit and a little honey, and that's fine. You get all the nutrients.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you've got the organs. Yeah.
I've lost 7 pounds myself.
So that's probably, that was your goal, right?
No, I'm going down. Well, I do knees over toes, and we were actually supposed to work out with Ben yesterday, but now he's at, wherever he went, Florida or somewhere. But I just want to get really fit. Like, okay. I want to look like, especially if I do get pregnant, now is the time when I want to be the healthiest I've ever been. I want to be the most fit I've ever been. So if I have a glass of wine, once or twice a week, or, caffeine, that's my big cheat. But I'm not really eating any rice. I'll have like a bite maybe, but I'm just trying to basically eat meat, and that's it, and some fruit.
How much bacon is Spencer eating?
every day.
Okay, there you go.
And then he was eating these maple sausages. I was like, oh my gosh, there's sugar in them and it's maple. Like, this is not.
Well, he's so close. Like, we can tune him up. I think
Yeah, you're right.
You'll have to let me know. You'll have to send me a message. But I think that if he stops the bacon and stops the rice, I bet he'll see weight loss. But we'll have to like come back and circle back and let me know how it goes. Yeah.
And we just got all our blood checked. So we have this really amazing scientist who's checking everything just for our mercury levels. I think we have too much mercury probably. So another question I had is water. So would you be concerned about the water you're bathing in here? Like, we're really good on drinking raw water, like live water, and we have a few sources, and we don't drink any plastic. We don't eat anything out of plastic. We're like very anti-plastic. But we don't have a overall water system for our house that we're bathing in. And what do you think about that?
Yeah, I do think about the water that I bathe in, but this is actually a pretty simple fix. I mean, you can do a whole house filter, but you can also go on Amazon and just get shower filters. And if you're drawing a bath for your son, the shower filter won't get in that water. So it's something to think about. But if you guys are showering in the water, you can I have on all of my house, in like every shower at my house in Costa Rica, like there's an outdoor shower by the pool. I put a filter on it. The indoor showers is a whole house filter, but you could also put a whole house filter on your house. That's pretty simple to do. But I would think about the water you bathe in, because again, it's like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, anything you put on your skin is going in your skin. So it's not the most important thing. I think it's most important is what you're drinking. But if chlorine and pesticides and pharmaceutical residues are going on your skin when you're showering, especially when you're vasodilated and your pores are open in the warm water, if you're taking a warm shower as opposed to a cold shower, it is something to think about. And if you're thinking about these other things, I would optimize that as well.
Okay. I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for all your work and all your great advice and your pump ups and everything that you've done and your research. And I love how factual everything is. And I'm feeling the best I've felt. And I don't even know how long I've had the most energy I've had. And also, like you say, it makes you prioritize other things. I'm like, well, now I need to remember to breathe and that I'm a person and I need to just not be on the go all the time. And this is where it's from. So it's helped me to also center a lot of things and rethink about a lot of things. So thank you for your time today and your work and your supplements. And I know you feel good about what you do, but I also feel good about being on it and being a part of this tribe and this new wavelength and being able to protect my son, because that's what we want to do as parents, right? That's our number one goal. So thank you. And hopefully we'll be in touch soon, unless you have anything else you wanted to throw out there.
No, thanks for the kind words. You're very welcome. I'm really grateful to do this work. It's fun to do it. I just get excited talking about it. And I'm always trying to evolve and present more scientifically factual things. And, a lot of it is kind of like if I feel, because there's not a study on this. So some of it is anecdotal and clinical experience, but there's a lot of interesting science behind most of it. And I'm so glad that you're feeling good and you're losing weight. And I think you're right. Like the kids, it's all about the kids. It's all about the next generations. I mean, we want to live well for the next generations. I want to be a good uncle for my niece and nephew. I want them to have the best life. I want my sister to be healthy so that she can take care of them. I think once you see a next generation in your life, it changes your perspective. Even if it's not for me, my kids, it's like, it's one, it's like a sibling removed, but it's still like, oh my gosh, like how do we protect them? And how do we give them the best, nutrition so that they grow up to be their full potential and do the most good in the world? So I'm super excited for you and your whole family. And yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast and asking some questions. Those are great. I think a lot of people will benefit. I guess we weren't even sure we were going to do this, but you were like, let's record. And I was like, oh, this is a great idea. So hopefully the people listening benefit from this, like just kind of casual back and forth. And it gives them a perspective on what's going on with an animal-based diet this month. And you'll have to keep me posted how it all goes. So thanks for spending your time with me too.
I will. Thank you so much. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.